Hey y'all, Josh here with the Family Dream Life Garden, and I've learned a lot about gardening over the years. I started as a teen, and most of what I learned was from an elderly lady. I'll link to a video about her and what she taught me in the past in the description of this video. But anyway, uh, this year I saw a few things on YouTube that I decided to give a shot. And some of them worked, but believe it or not, most of them did not. So I want to show you what didn't so you don't make the same mistakes. Check it out. One thing I found interesting, and I even did a video about it, was that sunflowers have to be direct sown. Apparently, you can't grow them by putting them in seed trays and transplanting. They don't like that. But my experience has been very different. Here's what I've seen. These are my direct sown sunflowers. And as you can see, they're relatively happy plants. They're coming up just fine. I'd say they're about a foot tall, the best ones. And throughout the line, there's a little bit of mixed results. There's some areas where they're very short. There's some areas where they just didn't take it all, like right here. But results have been mixed at best. And I was actually really surprised by the ones that I sowed earlier in seed trays. The video I came across said that when you sow in seed trays, you can take that seed tray sown sunflower, put it right next to a seed, and the seed would quickly outpace the one that's grown in the seed tray. But check out the ones that I grew in seed trays. These sunflowers were about 3-inch tall seedlings when I planted them in the ground. They started in seed trays. I transplanted them, and they've done really well. Though we have had one or two die off, and we do have one or two that are about that size. But the theory is that had I planted seeds right next to these, the seeds would have outgrown them. And that hasn't been the case because the seedlings I showed you earlier were planted at the same time that I planted these 3-inch seedlings. So, in my experience at least, direct sown doesn't work well. Maybe that has to do with the environment. Maybe the soil isn't right. Maybe it's too hot. Maybe it drains too much. I'm not quite sure. But in my experience, direct sowing wasn't the way to go with sunflowers. So far, the ones that I grew in seed trays are far outperforming the ones that were direct sown. Another thing that YouTube told me to do was something that I did with my tomato plants, and I'm really regretting it right now. Ever since I started growing tomatoes, what I would do is I'd prune the suckers, and I'd prune the leaves that looked like they were damaged. But if the leaves didn't look like they were damaged, I left them alone. And that seemed to work well for years, but for some reason, I decided to try what I saw in a video. And that video told me to prune every leaf up to the first bunch of fruit. So that's what I did. And the performance was horrible. Check it out. If you notice, there's a lot of fruit that I've picked and just left on the ground. I'm hoping maybe volunteer tomato plants will pop up. But ever since I've trimmed these plants, the fruits have started to get these spots. I think they're sunburn. And they really slowed the ripening process. So I don't think trimming it like this works. I think I'm going to stick with what I've done forever. The good news is that at least with some of these plants, I'm starting to see more production up toward the top where leaves were left, which at least that means I might get some tomatoes. And I did leave one plant for the most part alone. I did trim it more than I normally would, and it's got more tomatoes on it and more leaves on it than the others. So there is a bright lining to this dark cloud. And another piece of that bright lining is I learned something. And that's something that all gardeners should know. You can't really make mistakes, because if something doesn't go as planned, it wasn't a mistake, it's a learning experience. Now, there was one thing that I did that I can't blame on YouTube. This was all my doing. I did it on purpose, thinking I was doing something good. But I need to tell you about it because you might do it in your garden. I way overwatered my banana pepper plants. These things don't like as much water as I've been giving them. 2-3 hours a day of watering on a sprinkler has not been good for them. As you can see, their leaves are yellowing. And if you could taste their fruit, you would know that it's pretty watery. It doesn't taste like a banana pepper should. So I'm going to slow down watering on these guys as much as I can. But that brings up another mistake. I planted those peppers right next to water-loving crops. These are cucumbers. these cucumbers love water. You can't really water them enough. Well, you can, and I'm sure you can overwater them, but I haven't found that threshold. They're doing great. The peppers, on the other hand, not so much. So consider how you're planting, where you're planting, and how you're watering when you grow. The good news is that there's a lot of things that are going right in my garden. My strawberry patch couldn't look better. My cucumbers look great. My fruit trees are doing amazing. My green beans, my corn, my melons, my berries, raspberries. So many things that are doing well. But every year, I expect to make a mistake or two. If I don't, well, I'm just not pushing my limits. That's how you learn. So those are the things that I've done this year. A couple from YouTube and one from my own uh, experience. But anyway, those are things I've done this year that I won't do next year. If you have any, share them in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe. Keep growing, my friends.